Hey, I'm Dr. Wilson. I'm a PhD molecular biologist, and welcome to another COVID debunking video. I apologize in advance for this video because you're going to have to listen to the insufferable and grating voice of Russell Brand. I know, I'm sorry, but he has gone viral on several platforms lately, saying things that have long been debunked and are easily debunked. So I think it's worth covering him again and pointing out just how he is so wrong on pretty much everything he says when it comes to COVID. So let's jump right into it and get this over with.
A new study shows that heart attack deaths increased by 30% during the pandemic, and the only variable during that time was, of course, coronavirus itself. I mean, I can't think of any other variables, and neither can the mainstream media, interestingly.
All right, so I'm going to help explain what he's talking about in this video so that you don't have to listen to him as much. What he's covering here is a study that finds an increase in heart attacks in younger people during the course of the coronavirus pandemic. And the entire time he is going to be, suggesting that it's a particular thing, just in a wink, wink, nudge, nudge kind of way to avoid getting flagged by the YouTube algorithm. But he's making it clear to his audience that he thinks that it's COVID vaccines causing all of this stuff. But it's really easy to see that it's not, and we'll get there, but that's the point. So what else does he say to kind of set the stage here?
So immediately what they're discussing is the peculiar rise of heart attacks in people aged between 25 and 44. Now, is there anything that could have contributed to this? And of course, coronavirus itself could have contributed to it. It would be unscientific to reach a conclusion without doing the studies, without reading the data, without looking at the evidence, wouldn't it? So never do that.
All right, good, Russell. So you're saying that you should never not read the data and look at the evidence. But why don't you do that in this entire video? Seriously, he goes the whole time trashing mainstream media, but all he does this whole video is read articles from mainstream media. He never once looks at the data or reads the paper that this news broadcast is talking about. So, Russell, I'm going to do that for you. I'll look at the paper and hopefully, help you reach your goal of learning something, because it looks like you're having a hard time with that. All right, so this is the paper that he's talking about. Excess risk for acute myocardial infarction, heart attack, mortality during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, he is claiming that there must be some other reason other than COVID for these increases in heart attacks. But if you take 10 seconds to look at the data, that idea falls apart. In the very first figure, we can see that this increase in heart attacks started in 2020, right with the arrival of SARS-CoV-2. If it were a particular something else, then you would expect this increase in heart attacks to have coincided with that something else. But no, it coincides with COVID-19. And we can go deeper into this idea by looking at different data sets. I know that something that might confuse someone here is that a lot of these excess heart attack deaths are non-attributed to COVID officially. However, we know that COVID increases your risk of heart attack, of stroke, of several adverse health outcomes if you survive it and had a serious case of it. It's also possible that people could have died in circumstances where COVID was not an obvious contributing cause, but in reality it was. There are lots of complicating factors here, so let's, for example, look at total excess mortality instead of excess mortality associated with heart attacks. If we look at such excess mortality and plot it against confirmed COVID deaths, each spike in excess mortality coincides with waves of confirmed COVID deaths. This is a classic indicator of the fact that we don't capture all COVID deaths within our official reporting system. In other words, COVID deaths are almost always undercounted. But anyway, Russell, if it's not COVID causing all these excess deaths, please explain graphs like this. Please explain why higher excess death rates are associated with more unvaccinated US states or countries. So that's the entire premise of this video, pretty easily debunked, but there's more. He goes on to say other stupid things, surprisingly.
So, sometimes COVID was put on people's death certificates when they've been shot. The main news again, JFK died with COVID.
Wow, Russell. Not only was that a horribly stupid statement to make, but it's followed by a really tasteless joke. Yikes. This is a very old and very dumb idea that people who were shot and died could be counted as COVID deaths. No. A death could only even be considered as a COVID death if it was from natural causes. A gunshot wound is not a natural cause. Neither is a car crash. These are causes that would be immediately excluded as having COVID as a contributing factor. And I know the conspiracy theorists are going to bring up articles of some person who died in a car crash and was initially classified as a COVID death. If you actually look into these stories, they are very few and far between, and they are always corrected. What happens is their bodies are tested to see if they have SARS-CoV-2 infection at the time of death, so that people handling their bodies and paramedics know whether or not they were exposed to SARS-CoV-2. That might be indicated on their death certificate, but not as a contributing cause, and that might lead to a miscounting of it. However, again, they're few and far between, and they're usually corrected.
COVID causes inflammation of the blood vessels as well as other parts of the body, and also blood clots.
Maybe COVID causes blood clots. What else causes? Is there anything else that causes blood clots? It's probably COVID. Let's follow that science. And this is from Alex Jones at InfoWars. Did I say Alex Jones at InfoWars? I meant Reuters. This happened in May 2022. The US health regulator said on Thursday it was limiting the use of Johnson & Johnson's COVID-19 vaccine for adults due to the risk of a rare blood clotting syndrome. Okay.
You know, it's like Russell has no awareness. That example of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine being preferentially recommended against is a perfect example of safety surveillance working. And guess what? This vaccine side effects not being hidden by the government or other nefarious sources. And I don't know if Russell knows this, but the Johnson & Johnson vaccine works entirely differently from the Pfizer and Moderna mRNA vaccines. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine uses an adenoviral vector. That vector is proposed to have caused blood clots by interacting with human platelet factor 4, and that this interaction activates a cascade that, in very rare cases, results in the blood clots that were observed. In, again, very rare cases, about 1 in a million. mRNA vaccines don't have this adenoviral vector, they don't have this interaction with platelet factor 4, they do not cause blood clots. This has been extensively investigated, and they just don't cause blood clots. Meanwhile, COVID does increase your chances of thrombotic or blood clot events significantly. That's what the research and the evidence tells us, Russell. Are you reading that? Clearly not. This next bit is particularly disgusting, so again, I'm sorry, but I think it's worth showing how low Russell goes here.
Oh, maybe then you've got COVID, so, you can't do your regular regimen of push-ups and pull-ups and running in the park, so also you probably just go and lay down and have a heart attack.
That is just a slap in the face to anyone suffering from long COVID. Long COVID is genuinely debilitating in people who have really bad cases of it. So, yeah, they really can't do much. And yes, COVID itself had a devastating effect on their body, which on its own increases risk of cardiac outcomes later down the line, in addition to their lives being pretty much ruined, not being able to get out of bed, being very debilitated most of the time. It's not as simple as just getting out and exercising when you have long COVID. And it's just extremely insensitive and gross for Russell to ignore that and play up this little bit that he thinks is funny. It's just awful. But hey, because he isn't experiencing it, he has no sympathy towards it, so he gets to make fun of it and make money while doing it.
Here's some unconnected stories from Politico, which I'm sure have no bearing on this debate and definitely shouldn't have been included in that very thorough investigation undertaken by those brilliant people just then. The CDC and FDA announced recently that their surveillance system flagged a possible link between the new Pfizer-BioNTech bivalent COVID-19 vaccine and strokes in people aged 65 and over, but said they were continuing to recommend the shots.
This is old news. I made a whole video covering this, and the end of the story is that this safety signal turned out to be nothing. It was just a safety signal that they announced for transparency's sake. They specified in their announcement that this safety signal was a weak one, that it was probably nothing because other reporting systems had not caught the same safety signal. It was only one reporting system, and other countries had not caught this safety signal either. Nevertheless, they announced it for transparency's sake, investigated it, and confirmed that the COVID vaccine had nothing to do with this increase in reports of strokes. Again, if you want more details, go watch that video that I made on that topic. But Russell is, again, just reading mainstream media news and not looking at the actual research.
Elevated risk of myocarditis and pericarditis, 12 to 39 years of age. 30% increase of deaths by heart attack in young people. Wait, let me just do this again. Wait, I think I can do this.
You really can't, because myo and pericarditis are not heart attacks. They don't increase risk of heart attacks unless they're really severe, which in the case of mRNA vaccination, they are not. The vast majority of myo or pericarditis cases following mRNA vaccination are mild in nature and resolve on their own without medication. Meanwhile, myocarditis or pericarditis associated with viral infections are more often severe and can contribute to adverse cardiac outcomes later down the line. The amount of thought put into Russell's presentation here is dismally low.
Anyway, the whole thing was necessary because natural immunity simply wasn't an option. That much we know for sure. They were very clear about that. They've said that these measures are much more effective than natural immunity.
So here not only is Russell talking about this natural immunity thing, but he's also suggesting that Big Pharma can't charge you for natural immunity, and therefore it wasn't a solution. Oh my god, man. I'm sorry, even saying those ideas out loud is just ridiculous to me. Survivor's immunity is never something that was denied. Nobody ever said that if you get infected with SARS-CoV-2, it would not elicit an immune response. That was never said by scientists. What was said is that surviving a SARS-CoV-2 infection and gaining immunity is not the solution to the pandemic. Because what happens in order to gain that immunity is you have to get infected. And when you get infected, there's a risk that you'll get very sick, and you might have to go to the hospital or take some other form of drugs. And guess what happens when you go to the hospital and you take those drugs? Pharmaceutical companies make money. Russell, what's more expensive? A couple of vaccines that are very cheap to produce and cost you, an insured person, $0? Or a trip to the hospital, which could result in multi-$1,000 bills? I'll give you time to think about that one. So if SARS-CoV-2 keeps circulating and keeps creating wave after wave of illness, sending more and more people to the hospital, pharma keeps making money. But instead we have vaccines to help prevent those trips to the hospital and save you money. Saying that Big Pharma is corrupt and just wants to make money by keeping you sick makes just about as much sense as saying that Big Pharma is absolutely perfect and never does anything to make money. Big Pharma are corporations run by people. Most people who work in the pharmaceutical industry do their best to do a good job and put out good products, because good products ultimately are going to help people and make money. But there are some people in that field who try to cut corners and do nefarious things. There are plenty of stories of both. And it would be just the same if you wanted to go with a big corporation that makes natural supplements or cures for certain ailments or diseases. That's why there are several regulatory bodies and checkpoints designed to prevent nefarious action of selling drugs improperly or making them sloppily. And yeah, they're not perfect, but if you want to take it upon yourself to be an investigatory journalist and figure out if a particular drug falls into the category of bad or good, then you have to actually read the data, Russell. You can't just read headlines and certain paragraphs from mainstream media, which apparently you hate, and then call it a day, make a video, and have your audience go, "Ooh, yeah, that's good. I trust this guy. He's smart." That's why I have a lot of links to the data in the description of this video so that you can read them for yourself, educate yourself, and make a proper decision. You are not going to get that watching Russell Brand. And Russell, I hope you actually take your advice and read the data for once if you want to get to the truth, because you're certainly not there right now. Well, that's going to do it for this week's video. If you're still watching, then thank you for bearing with me and listening to Russell's voice. I promise that you're not going to hear it again for a very long time on this channel. Once again, the links to all of the science that I talk about in this video are linked in the description below, so please check those out if you want to learn more. And thank you, as always, for watching. I really do appreciate it. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe so that you can catch me next week, where I'll be debunking some more funky stuff. See you then.